Today, a majority of Minneapolis City Council members revealed their plan to defund and dismantle the police department.
The announcement is a direct response to protesters demanding change in the wake of George Floyd's death.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
We're talking about a paradigm shift in the way that cities and states, the way our society understands the needs of communities. That is long-term work.
I want to be looking at civilization and our own traditions before police. I think it's one of those moments where we need to be returning to our own cultural roots, returning to our own cultural traditions, and like really thinking about like what did they do to keep each other safe, and how can we apply that to the world that we live in now.
Our folks are not actually given the tools and space to be able to imagine a world without police. And my fear is that we're going to pick up crumbs when we need to ask for more. I kind of think about like the restructuring period of right after the abolishment of slavery. I'm not going to say it was the best times, but it was a time that then moved us forward and progressed us into a future that a lot of people couldn't see 10 years before.
This is about identifying specific interventions and implementing them to address a broad range of problems.
It's also about developing alternative emergency response systems that can provide rapid response support and safety interventions that don't rely on someone with a gun and a badge and handcuffs and the authority to kill with immunity. We can go down the list. There can be violence interruption and prevention, where people in the communities respond with crisis-informed approaches, where there's tools and resources to respond to whatever the situation is. But if you're having a mental health crisis, if someone shows up with a gun, that might escalate the situation, especially if you have any kind of experience with police violence.
You can look at any major American city and then immediately go to the first-ring suburbs and look at the most affluent suburbs and look at the amazing infrastructure that they have. So just like even like the little cities within our greater city as a whole, like there are still neighborhoods that have absolutely no police interaction because there aren't the type of crimes that are survival crimes that keep getting reported and unjustly criminalized against Black and brown bodies. So when we're taking the money away from the police and actually investing it into our infrastructure, you are going to see a crime rate drop.
There's going to be an assessment period where we figure out what is it that we need in this moment. What are some departments that are underfunded, right? Housing department, right? How are we actually housing people so that is not something that they're policed on?
The social services are going to take some time, right? It's not enough just to say, I've got psychological services available, and now we're not going to have any money in law enforcement. So what we may end up needing to do before we defund is invest in Black communities. Ultimately, I'm fairly convinced that that can be both cost saving and more aligned with the values that we have as a nation. But it's not as simple as take money from here, put it into here, and then here we'll start doing the work that here used to.
It is about thinking, as we do in our work, hiring those who are directly impacted to be a part of a new care infrastructure.
It's going to take a lot of really good leadership on the local level.
We need to create real processes of community consultation, perhaps built on models like participatory budgeting, that give communities a voice in determining their own safety.
It's critical to center those at the margins, right? So Black women, Black, queer, transgender, non-conforming folks, poor people, and groups who are marginalized within being marginalized.
There are a number of these incredible programs on the violence intervention and prevention side that can contribute to this conversation, alongside advocates who are looking at the other parts of the criminal justice system, how prisons and jails, how bail reform works.
You need to have folks who can frankly answer questions that are empirical questions. Like, how much of police time is used dealing with violence? We just saw the piece in the New York Times saying that in at least a small handful of cities, it's about 4% of the time. The data scientists, the nerds need to be in the room, and those voices need to be trusted. That means their processes need to be legitimate and transparent.
While the proposals about how to move forward in Minneapolis are encouraging, it's going to take sustained political mobilization to make sure they follow through on those pledges. There's always the risk of backsliding.
What I just hope and ask of every single person involved in the movement, from the folks on the ground all the way up to the governor's office, is that we take a moment to slow down and do this process right, to give ourselves permission to make mistakes.
There's a bunch of bad off-ramps to the superhighway that the country is on right now. A bunch of half measures where you committed to disband, and what you really did was you shrunk the budget by a little bit that was supplemented by federal data. That's not going to feel right to the community. I think a process that doesn't have real community input, which I know we're hearing pretty consistently from folks on the ground in Minneapolis, is part of what they feel like is happening. It's a political process that's absent the people. That would be a disaster. A process that does not put into place clear metrics on how we say, this is how we know we succeeded. A plan that doesn't have metrics attached to it is a plan that frankly isn't really serious in this moment. Those are all things that could be terribly disastrous, but in the end, I think the worst thing that could happen is that nobody tries.